Okay, I'm just going to start unmuting people. Just give me a second. If anyone just wants to mute themselves.
How do you do that when it's on? Oh, never mind. Right.
Okay. 1 second. Okay, Your Worship.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the special council meeting of Cobourg Municipal Council on Monday, March 23rd at 3 p.m. utilizing the electronic participation by members pursuant to Section 3.4 of Bill 187, an act to amend the Municipal Act 2001 and the City of Toronto Act 2006. I'd also like to inform our public this is our first attempt at bringing electronic participation to you. We ask that you bear with us as we go through this particular session. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest members of council?
No.
Seeing none, I'd like to proceed to our Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item is under General Government Services is a bylaw 021-2020, being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 009-2019, being to establish the rules of order and procedures for municipal council and committee meetings of the Corporation of the Town of Cobourg. Action recommended that council adopt Bylaw 021-2020, being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 009-2019, being to establish the rules of order and procedures for municipal council meetings of the Corporation of the Town of Cobourg, to include the ability for members to participate electronically during declared emergency.
A seconder?
I'll second it.
Is there a hand or a hand up?
Yep, Councillor Darling.
Thank you, Councillor Darling, for that. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Would anybody like, I guess that could be discussed in the second part. All in favor?
Okay.
I see Aaron Burke. Sorry, to go quickly. I saw hands from, therefore carried. Thank you. There were none opposed, so it's carried. Back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. That the following bylaw be passed. Bylaw 021-2020, being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 009-2019, being to establish the rules of order and procedures for municipal council and committee meetings of the Corporation of the Town of Cobourg. Action recommended that leave be granted to introduce Bylaw 021-2020 and to dispense with the reading of the bylaws by the municipal clerk, and that the same be considered read and passed, and that the mayor and the municipal clerk sign the same and the seal of the corporation be thereto affixed.
Seconder. I see Councillor Burkett. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Sorry, Your Worship. I believe Councillor Chorley had a question, maybe?
Okay, thank you. I missed that. Councillor Chorley.
Sorry for the delay. I did have a question. First of all, I'd like to thank the clerk for implementing this change so quickly. But the province has indicated that meetings must continue to be open to the public. I'm just wondering about public participation. Assuming electronic council meetings need to continue for several weeks or months, how will the public be able to participate through delegations and open forum And I'm just wondering if you can explain how that will work in practice.
Mr. Larmer, either to you or again to our CAO, Mr. Davy, but let's start with you, Mr. Larmer.
So, Your Worship, members of council, it's a relatively 3-day-old legislation, and it's something that we haven't used before, any other municipalities, so we're kind of turning the wheel ourselves across the province for this. One of the main points that the government did when they enacted this was to still allow for public participation to occur. Part of that is actually streaming live, which we're doing today. That way members of the public can view it and can understand and know that we're actually conducting an open forum. I'm still working through how we're going to accomplish to allow them to A, be a delegation, and 2, to actually be through committee open forum. The only alternative I can think is we'd have technically 3 separate meetings electronically if we were. Just because if we give this meeting information out to members of the public, they can join in anytime and interrupt the session. So that's kind of the issue. So I think some of the recommendations that I've looked forward is, create 3 separate kind of video, not meetings, but video calls. So the first one everyone joined on would be a delegation meeting. Once that ended, we'll kick it out. The staff council will go into their own meeting through this Zoom app. Once that's done, we'll end that kind of stream, still the same agenda, enter a new session, which will all be through the live stream. And then we'll have a spot for committee of the whole forum for members to come. But the caveat would be that everyone would have to register ahead of time and also let us know their capacity either through teleconference or video conference. And I would have to work with them prior in order to set that up to allow them to come forward. Council right now has suspended their meetings until April 6th. Right now, this is just a special meeting, so no delegations, it's just on specific items. If council were to direct us to go forward with these meetings on a future basis, the regular scheduled one, we definitely would have to factor that in, and I'd have to work that out.
Does that help, Councillor Chorley? That explanation from our clerk?
Yes, it's very helpful. Thank you very much. And I do have another question if no one else has a question.
Go ahead.
Again, to the clerk, I'm just wondering if you can explain whether this change in our procedural bylaw also applies to town boards and advisory committees. And in theory, if they would be allowed to meet remotely and online. And if that's possible, how quickly could that be implemented if we wanted to proceed with resuming those meetings?
Mr. Larmer?
Yep, I'm just trying to get clarification. It looks like that with this legislation that's in place is that it now gives the capacity for council to amend the procedural bylaw to allow electronic meetings, not just for council, but also with committees and some local boards as well. But it's only during a declared emergency. So it would only be when it's a declared emergency. Obviously, there's a number of different, there's a provincial emergency declaration, then there's the municipal state of emergency, which we're in as well too. So those cases, there's other pieces of legislation that comes in bylaws. For example, our emergency management plan comes into action. There's a number of different things that come into action. So the necessity for advisory committees to meet during a declared emergency isn't paramount or important. They're very important during the regular business, but during this kind of really chaotic and intense time for the public, staff, and members of the public all over, it could allow for that, but we have to really weigh why and how we can do that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chorley, is that answer suffice at this point?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions I may have missed? I apologize before we proceed. Seeing none, I'll go back to the Deputy Mayor.
Call the vote, Your Worship.
Yes, I call the vote. If there are no other comments, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. I believe in following our agenda, this now calls for adjournment of what we might call a special council meeting, agenda number 1. Could I have a all in favor? Seconder, Aaron, Councillor Burkett, all in favor? Carried. This meeting is adjourned. And Mr. Larmer, do you need a few moments to set up for special council meeting number 2?
Yes, I do. So if we just
Thank you.
put everyone on mute, I'll get the live stream finished for this one and I'll start the next one as well. It is scheduled for approximately 3:30, but I think we can still start it in just a few minutes as well. Just give 30 seconds, Your Worship, and we can start. And everybody
Sorry.
should mute their own.
Mr. Larmer, can you move the one part of the screen over, like the agenda part, so that on the side we can read like keep going a little bit more? Oh, the other way.
Sorry, it's all how you put your screen functioning. I hope that works.
That's perfect.
Okay, Your Worship.
I'd like to call the special council meeting agenda number 2 of the Cobourg Municipal Council, Monday, March the 23rd at 3:20, utilizing electronic participation by members regarding financial assistance in response to COVID-19. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests of members of council? Seeing none, I'd like to proceed to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item is a memo from the Interim Chief Administrative Officer, Deputy Treasurer, Director of Corporate Services regarding financial assistance in response to COVID-19. The action recommended that council receive the report from the Interim Chief Administrative Officer, Treasurer for information purposes.
Seconder. Councilor Burkett. All in favor? Carried. Is there any discussion on any of the items and starting before us? Mr. Davey, is there anything you would like to comment on at this point regarding the recommendations?
Sorry, Your Worship, we just have to get down to the motions part of it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, I apologize. So at this point, we had it all carried. I'll ask that again just to ensure I saw the hands. All those in favor of the first part? Carried, thank you. And back to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Of the motion part.
Services. The special
Breaking up.
pandemic. And I will read the motion. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Darling. Whereas at a special meeting of council on March 23rd, 2020, council Director
Just give it a second, Your Worship. We'll just wait for her to come back in and then we'll get her to read it again.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You just give it a couple seconds here. Okay, maybe try it again. Moving, sorry, Your Worship.
You want me to start from the beginning? Okay, start from the beginning, Mr. Larmer?
Yes.
Okay. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Darling. Whereas at the special meeting of council on March 23rd, 2020, council considered a memo from the interim chief administrative officer, treasurer, director of corporate services regarding financial assistance in response to COVID-19. Now therefore be it resolved that council adopt the following measures in order to provide financial relief for the taxpayers and residents of the town of Cobourg. 1. Transit service will be provided at no charge until May 1st, 2020. In addition, the extended hours for accessible transit be eliminated until May 1st, 2020. 2. Free parking will be provided in all municipal lots and at all municipal parking meters until May 1st, 2020. 3. A waiver of all penalties and interest charges on unpaid property taxes which would normally have been applied on April 1st, 2020 and May 1st, 2020. 4. The due date for the second installment of the commercial, industrial, and multi-residential property taxes due May 29th, 2020 be deferred until June 25th, 2020. The due dates for the residential final tax bills which have not yet been issued will be set as of June 25th, 2020 and October 29th, 2020. And finally, 6, any taxpayers on the pre-authorized payment plan with concerns about paying their next payment due April the 10th, 2020 may contact the finance department to discuss payment arrangements.
And I believe that's been moved and seconded. Is there any particular discussion on items on the list? I know there's a number of them, and please tell me how you would like to proceed. Councillor Beatty?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is more of a question of clarity for myself through you to possibly the clerk, if I may. And that is, I understand this is a detailed list. Are we allowed to ask general financial assistance questions of the CAO at this time? Or do they have to be questions directed specifically to the motion?
Well, they should be, in my opinion, specific to the motion before us, but they can also be directed to the CAO if in particular, a particular item or number he can add or shed some information. But it would have to be to those that are before us on the list.
Okay, I will reserve my question then, thank you.
Councillor Darling?
Yes, if I may, if there is a discussion regarding the motion, would it be possible to discuss each item individually, start at one and proceed down the list rather than a whole discussion jumping back and forth with all the items?
By all means, Councillor Darling, would you like to make a motion to that effect? Because if you make a motion and it's carried, then we can do according to your recommendation.
Okay, sir, I will make the motion to that the motion be broke down and discuss each individual item at once or at a time.
Okay, for members of council, is there needed anything repeated to this motion before us? Councillor Beatty, have a question?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. This is just again a question of clarification for myself and through you to the clerk. We have a motion to divide right now. Opportunity to make motions to amend or additional items. That will come after we've discussed the points at hand, correct?
I apologize, I'm not clear on your question.
I have a few additional recommendations for financial assistance that I would like council to consider. So at what point in this discussion in the meeting would I be able to bring those forward?
I'll get direction from our clerk, Mr. Larmer.
So the way the motion is set, it's an ominous fees that the treasurer's done. I don't know if you want to speak to him before this happens on the actual motion. I think that might be appropriate because he wrote it, put his recommendation on the floor. But just to let you can divide the motion, but what will happen is it'll divide into 6 different parts. Each motion will be voted on individually and resolution. So it'd be only on those particular items if you divide this motion in 6 parts.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I appreciate that. I don't think it gives me the direction I'm looking for as to the opportunity for a counselor to make a recommended addition. So an 8th or a 7th, an 8th or a 9th item.
Okay, I see Mr. Davy. Mr. Davy, would you like to comment?
Well, your worship, my preference would be that perhaps we go through the items 1 to 6. I can give a brief explanation of the rationale behind why they're worded that way. And then if council wish to add additional items, they could certainly, I think, be discussed at that time. I mean, the point with this is that we're trying to get everything on the table and have a fulsome discussion about it. So that would be my preference as we go through these 6, deal with them one by one, and then if there are other items, maybe just add them at the end.
Okay, thank you. Is that, Councillor Beatty, back to you. Does that meet with what you were hoping?
Yes, thank you. I just want to make sure that I don't miss the opportunity if I have to put a formal motion forward for additions. Because I just don't want the conversation to happen and close and then I didn't bring those forward. So I understand that there'll be that opportunity after we review the 6 items. There will be an opportunity to bring forward additional items for consideration.
I'd like to go back to Councillor Darling. Councillor Darling, could I ask you to make clear that motion, and then I'll make sure there's a seconder, and then we can vote accordingly. So if you could do that once again for me for clarity purposes.
Yes, your worship. I'd like to make a motion to divide the original motion into 6 parts as numbered.
Seconder?
Oh,
I see
the-
Mr. Larmer.
Procedurally,
Larmer?
procedurally, that doesn't work like that. If you divide the motion of all 6 separate parts, you're making 6 different resolutions. So what the treasurer says, we speak about the motion that's on the table, go through these, make any amendments on them. Once that's done, we've done that, then you can separate all of them, whether there's 8 now or 9, then you can separate them all and vote on
Okay.
them.
That'll work.
Does that work? Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So Mr. Davy, could I ask you to speak to number 1, please?
Yes, your worship. So the issue with transit service first started to come up probably the middle of last week. This came out of the issue with the closing of Transition House and how the people, where the people that are were currently using Transition House, where they would be relocated and how they would get back and forth. Is my sound coming through all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm not hearing it on my end. That's all right. So in any event, the issue became how would these folks, if the temporary shelter was located outside downtown, how would they get there? And then that evolved to we'd provide free passes for those folks, and then it became much more sensible to just make the whole service free. Number one, because it's difficult to get passes to these folks. And number two, then the other issue that came up was we're trying to maintain social distancing. So if any passenger getting on the service had to come right up to the driver at the front of the bus and either present cash or tickets or a pass, it would be very difficult for them. So the idea, and we quickly learned that several other centers had also provided
Okay, everybody, just give us a couple more minutes. Just to let everyone know at home, we're trying to get the audio sorted out for everyone, just to make sure everyone hears it at home. That's what happened there. So just make sure that's done. Okay, Your Worship.
Yeah, I believe where we last left off, the question from Councillor Barreau was in terms of the actual hours. Any changes, the question was referred or deferred to either Mr. Davey or the clerk for a response.
Well, I thought we already talked about that.
Well, if we did, I missed it.
Oh, okay.
So I can just repeat then, Your Worship. What we have determined is that the extended hours are not being used at this time. That's not to say they wouldn't be if we carry forward, but the evidence to this point says that they're not being used. So in effect, we're not saying that the accessible transit would stop running. It would continue to run the same as the regular transit service. And it's just strictly the additional couple hours of a night rather, that is being offered, the extended hours that we're discussing here.
Was
The mayor's locked up.
oh,
Mr. Mayor, are you online?
Deputy Mayor, just want to take over. The mayor's just coming back online. I think Councilor Beer has a question.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll keep an eye on the mayor's, oh, no, he's back. Okay.
Mayor's back.
So Councillor Barreau, does that answer your question?
yes, but I still don't agree with it.
I'm not asking whether you agree. That will come in a vote. What I'm asking
Well,
is,
that wasn't.
you
That
understand Mr. Davies' response.
I understand interim CAO Davies' response.
Okay.
I do have other questions though on this.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Darling, and then I'll come back to you. Councillor Darling?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I just like to thank the CAO for clarifications, and that was my understanding, that we're just cutting back a couple hours extended. We're still being fair. We're running the regular transit service along with the Wheels transit service for the regular period of the day. So
That is
that's
correct.
what I wanted to clarify, that I agree with that. Thank you.
Okay, back to you, Councillor Burrow.
The one other question that I have is I know sometimes that the accessible transit is not running. Does that have anything to affect with the ridership numbers?
Mr. Davy?
So I know that there's been problem with some of the buses and that. I'm just wondering if that is one of the reasons why the ridership is down.
Again, Mr. Davy for a response.
Well, again, I'm not aware of specific times when the accessible transit has not been available. But what I'm referring to is specifically those extended hours that are being reported that there's no ridership during those extended hours. I don't believe that's because the service was not available.
Okay. Any other questions from members of council for clarification? Councillor Chorley?
I just wanted to share with members of council that I did reach out to 2 members of our Accessibility Advisory Committee to try and get their feedback on the proposed cut to extended accessible transit hours. And their feedback was that there isn't really anything open. There's nothing to travel to, and they're okay with a temporary cut in extended hours. But I would just warn that this is just 2 individuals, and we do have quite a big Wheels ridership. I personally really hesitate to cut this because I know how much our Wheels riders rely on this service, and that there is no alternative. Once we cut it, it's not like they can get a ride from a friend or even order an accessible taxi. So I do hesitate to cut the hours. And I just want to clarify, if it's possible, Mr. Davy, could you make it very clear what the current hours of operation is for extended accessible transit and what the hours would be if you were to cut it?
Mr. Davy?
I don't have that information in front of me, I'm sorry. My understanding is it's 2 extra hours right now past when the regular transit stops.
Okay. I'm going to Councillor Burkett, then Councillor Beatty.
So with the wheel service, it is my understanding that individuals would have to still continue to book in advance as they do now. So it would be my understanding that the Wheels bus wouldn't be running unless people have booked that service. Am I correct in that, Mr. Davy?
There'd be no, based on this, there would be no changes to the system as it currently is operating. That's correct.
Deputy Mayor, just wanted to.
Sorry, we've lost the mayor again. Councillor Beatty, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the CAO, is there an opportunity for the after hours to switch to an on-call service? Because again, echoing a little bit of hesitation to support the reduction in hours, in particularly those that, if necessary, would have to get to something like the hospital.
Sorry, we're left off with Councillor Burkett. He didn't finish his statement, so I'm going to start with Councillor Burkett. And then I'll go to Councillor Beatty.
Just your workshop, just because you froze, the Deputy Mayor just resumed chair for a second and then asked Councillor Beatty to speak. So Councillor Beatty, just.
Okay.
My apologies, through the Deputy Mayor, or through your worship to the CAO, would you like me to repeat my question?
I would.
Okay, thank you. My question was just out of again, a little bit of a hesitation to cut hours, just in case somebody had to get to a place like the hospital. My understanding is the assessment clinics are open, I believe, till 8 p.m. And obviously that's subject to change. So my direct question would be to the interim CAO, is there an opportunity to switch the after-hour service to an on-call service?
Mr. Davy?
Yes, Your Worship. I don't really see that that would be a viable option. I think if that was the route that council wished to go, I think it would be just better to leave the extended hours as they are, because obviously the transit company, the contractor would have to staff so to be able to deliver that service. So I think if that were the option, I think the preference would be to maintain the status quo.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
I believe we've, Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Darling.
If I could suggest, currently the transit is operating at no cost, correct? This is the emergency control group put that forward. Is that correct, Mr. Davy?
That's correct. As of last, I'm not sure what day it was, Wednesday or Thursday, that's the way it's been operating. That's correct. At the time when we made the decision to close all municipal buildings to the public, from that point on, it became very apparent that it was going to be difficult for people to be able to get passes or tickets, and so that's why that decision was made.
And a follow-up, please, Your Worship, if what date was given by the emergency control group for that to be extended to? Was that till the end of April?
Mr. Davy?
Well, there has been no, sorry, there has been no date put on that. It was just a change that was made. So that's really the purpose of this motion, to make a date of May the 1st, make it a little more formal at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Darling?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Davy, part of your explanation was the fact that they wanted to kind of try and make sure that there was enough drivers. So if something happens that we get drivers ill and they can't provide this extended service, or they don't have enough drivers, I'm just wondering, do you know how many drivers there are and how much of a risk this is, that we could run out of drivers and may not be able to provide any transit?
Mr. Davy?
Yes, through you to Councillor Darling, I was able to confirm with the Director of Public Works that at this point, the contractor is not having a problem with drivers or providing enough drivers to maintain this level of service that we have right now. So I can't speak to, how much depth they have in that driver pool, or, if they started to experience a problem. All I can say is at this point in time, it's not a problem, and they're confident that they can continue to provide these extended hours. It would only be really a precautionary thing to try and whether that, whether that would be of a big assistance to them or not, is just a guess at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, there's been lots of discussion. Mr. Larmer, could I ask you, just for a point of consideration, within the transit, there seems to be two elements. One is the extension of free transit until the period suggested. The other deals with the special service extension. The reason I'm asking that, if a councillor wants to subdivide that, is that appropriate under our procedures? Because in the discussion, I'm hearing two distinct conversations. Could you guide me accordingly?
Through your worship, right now, it looks like we're going through each of them in the single motion. When somebody puts the motion to divide on the floor, they can separate those two from one if they wish to make it 7, unless there's additional.
Okay, I'm putting that before the member of council. The way it is now, it's treated as one. Is there anybody who wishes to treat it as two separate? In other words, we'll deal with the transit being free, and then the other dealing with the extended service. Deputy Mayor?
I will do that because there seems to be consensus or discussion around there. So I will move forward that we divide number 1 into 2 distinct units for further discussion and for voting.
Okay, so the first one will deal with the free transit to the days suggested. I need a seconder on that.
Just for your worship, we're just going through the motion right now. We haven't actually divided the motion yet. The
Okay.
CA is just putting his rationale for each item for discussion, and then someone will bring that forward.
Then we're going to go back all the way to the top.
Well, then if somebody, member of council, is going to divide the motion in how many parts we have, then that'll be, or council can select to vote in one entire motion. But the CEO is just going through each one right now, providing that information. to council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Charlie, I'll take your question and I'll continue. Go ahead.
Another question on transit, and this is a question on conventional transit. I'm wondering, Mr. Davey, if you can explain whether there have been any additional cleaning measures introduced to our public transit buses, and whether there have been any measures to help separate the riders so that they are maintaining 6 feet of distance between each other. And again, this is really to address my concerns about whether ridership might go up with free transit.
Mr. Davey?
So all I can confirm on that is that right from day one, when we started to implement additional cleaning measures in all of our municipal buildings, the Director of Public Works has been in contact with the transit contractor in terms of what their cleaning protocols would be. And we've been assured that they have been stepped up. They've also provided us details of the product that they're using to clean with. And in terms of separation of riders, that's certainly been the direction. I can't confirm that it's actually happening or not happening, but that has certainly been the direction, that as much as possible that they would maintain a social distancing between the riders individually. And we've implemented that riders, my understanding is that riders would enter from a rear door, so they wouldn't be coming right up the steps toward the driver, to try and maintain that social distancing as well. So that's certainly been the direction, and I hope that is what's being followed.
Oh, have we lost the mayor again?
Yeah, you might just give it a couple seconds. Just coming back. We're just putting him. He's just on wireless. We're gonna actually put in a cable for him. So just give it a couple seconds. We'll be back in seconds.
Not enough time for a break, Bureau.
What was that?
I'm glad to hear that the issue is with the wireless, because we've become so reliant on this technology that I would hope that it's not going to become an issue.
Okay, he's back now.
He's back. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Beatty.
Thank you. Just a short question, and I apologize if this was mentioned, because some people were cutting out. Through your worship to the CAO, can you just, what is the current capacity? How many people can be on the bus, on the conventional bus at a time, through the public health advisory that allows social distancing as well as the safety of the driver, but ensuring that the people get to go where they're going? Like, is there a capacity? Are we setting a limit on how many people can get on the bus at one time?
Mr. Davey?
I'm not aware that direction has come out. If it has, I haven't personally heard it, but it's certainly a good direction. I know a lot of the stores in that around town are starting to limit how many shoppers they let in at a time, kind of thing. So it's certainly something going forward that we will look at. I just don't think it's been an issue to this point, just because I don't think the ridership has really changed.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to, if I may, at this point, move on to number 2, and I could have it read again. And then Mr. Davey, could I have you speak to that? Item 2.
I'll read it again, Your Worship. Number 2 is free parking will be provided in all municipal lots and at all municipal parking meters until May 1st, 2020.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Are there any questions to that recommendation before us? Councilor Barreau?
Yeah, this is kind of a tricky one. I understand where you're going with the free parking, but when we're all supposed to be under social distancing and self-isolation, to me, that's sending kind of the wrong message of come on, let's park downtown or in the municipal lots, because that's where a majority of them are, when a lot of the stores as of tomorrow will be closed. And so pretty much the whole downtown will be shut. My feeling is on this is because the town hall will be closed, is closed to the public. I would like to waive any of those bylaw infractions or fees until the town hall reopens. I think that would be a better message sent rather than saying the municipal lots will be free parking.
Okay, point taken. Any other questions, clarification, questions? Councillor Darling?
You're muted, Brent.
Can I get Councillor Bureau explain that again, the difference between what he's stating and the free parking?
Well, what the motion says, I don't have it up in front of me right now, but it says basically that it'll be free parking in all municipal lots. And so to me, having promoting that it'd be free parking and on parking meters when the downtown's pretty much closed, it doesn't really make sense to me. I think it would be a better, if we're talking about financial tax savings to the citizens, I would think that instead of that, if we just hold on to the bylaw infractions instead of promoting free parking, that we hold on to the bylaw infractions and wait until the town hall is back open. So waive any fees like parking ticket fees or any bylaw infractions until a later date. I just don't think that the free parking, I think it kind of goes without saying. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, I'd like to first go to Mr. Davey had his hand up. I'd like clarification from the clerk regarding your point. So Mr. Davey?
Yes, Your Worship, just by way again of explanation for this one, it's similar to the transit passes in the sense that without the municipal offices being open, it's a little more challenging for people to get parking passes. I know we have other options for that now. The other issue again goes back to human resources. We only have one bylaw officer. Typically that person is the one that empties the meters of coin. So for the last week and a bit, that person has been off. So we haven't been able to do that. And now that our bylaw officer's back, there's going to be other issues, I'm afraid, as we move forward, where we're going to need enforcement, again, of higher priority than emptying parking meters. And I think in these times, we certainly don't want to be issuing someone a parking ticket. And so we're not going to me, if we're not going to enforce, and we know we're not going to enforce, then, why go through the motion of doing that? And I think people are still we're Canadians, we're still going to put coins in the meter if we think we're supposed to, and then that's just going to create an issue. If they're not being emptied, then the meters are going to, have problems. So I think again, it's more of a combination of this one's obviously not a huge, big financial relief in terms of that part, as much as it's just sort of common sense that if we know we're not going to enforce it, why not just allow people that are trying to get to those businesses that are still able to operate, allow them to get there without then creating something where people have to handle a lot of coin and that sort of thing. That was the thought process behind that.
I'm sorry.
And Mr. Larmer, if you could comment, because I know there would be outstanding issues through the roll fences already given, but I'll allow you to comment on that perhaps.
Oh, I think the interim CEO has hit it on the nail with his explanation on that. So there's no additional work other than the bylaws in place, and the only way to repeal the provision of the bylaw for the enforcement is to actually repeal the bylaw. We don't want to do that because the bylaw we still want in existence for parking. So the waiving of the fees allows to council to stop that, because if you don't have to pay the fees as citizens, then there's no tickets for us to issue under that. So you waive the actual paying of the fees for parking. So that's why we went this route. Also, all the courts are closed too. Administration with the COVID-19 as well, including our Northumberland POA court. So anyways, that process, we're not pushing anything to the courts because they don't have the staff, as well as the court trials are suspended until further notice as well.
Okay, any other questions, clarification? Councillor Burrow?
So through you to the clerk, does that mean anybody who's had a fine in the past, I think the parking fine to pay at the town hall is 15 days. I'm not sure on the other bylaws infractions if they get fines on the time length, but I assume it's all the same. 15 days to pay it and then it goes to court. Is there any, has there been any bylaw infractions that have happened that people aren't being able to pay because the town hall is closed, whether it be through because they don't understand how to use the computer or technology in that sense, so they may get extra late fees and stuff like that?
Mr. Larmer?
Through you, worship, to the member, since I think 2 weeks ago, we've actually stopped issuing tickets based on what's happening in COVID-19 with how the province has reacted, our response to it, as well as our only staff member being off. But I have received some stuff from the province as well as the county regarding our POA parking and the court systems. And basically all the limitation periods have been waived until further notice or pushed down the line. So this will incorporate all statutory timelines, like 15 days, notice of pending conviction, which is another 15 days. So a lot of that stuff is moving back until further notice from the province. It's a senior regional justice that sets that, and they're working on that. So nobody will be penalized for this at all.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, I'd like to move to item number 3. And Deputy Mayor, thank you for reading that again.
Thank you, Your Worship. Number 3, a waiver of all penalties and interest charges on unpaid property taxes, which would normally have been applied on April 1st, 2020 and May 1st, 2020. That's it.
Okay, any discussion otherwise on item number 3? Seeing no one, Deputy Mayor, let's go to item number 4.
Number 4, the due date for the second installment of the commercial, industrial, and multi-residential property taxes due May 29th, 2020, be deferred until June 25th, 2020.
Any clarity, discussion on item number 4 from members of council? Mr. Davey, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this is one that very quickly, when this crisis started to happen and move quickly, we started to have some phone calls from really our commercial landlords saying that they were very concerned about their tenants and their tenant businesses. And in order to try and assist them, they were starting to take steps to either defer or reduce or waive the rent. And so then, the issue became, if I'm not collecting rent, how will I pay my tax installments? So you'll remember that back earlier, we passed the interim tax bylaw, which created a due date at the end of February for residential taxpayers. And for commercial, industrial, and multi-res taxpayers, it gave them 2 due dates. We split that in half. They pay half the same as the residential at the end of February, and they pay the other half at the end of May. And so in light of that, and to try and find a bit of relief for those property owners, that's why we're suggesting here that we put that date off for that second half of the installment for those taxpayers that pay their installments on the due dates, as opposed to our pre-authorized payments, that we give them an extra month, at least at this point, just to try and give them some breathing room as well.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Any question, clarification? Councillor Beattie?
Thank you, Your Worship. My apologies, I'm just trying to switch through the various screens. Through you to the interim CEO, Mr. Davey, I think this question falls into this category. When I was looking at what other municipalities have put into place, one of the items is payments process for businesses. And I believe this comes through some of the recommendations that MPPs and local chambers are sharing. So the delay or temporarily eliminating taxes and fees on businesses, does this fall under this point, this category?
Mr. Davey?
If I could just ask the counselor to perhaps rephrase that question, because I'm not sure exactly what the point of the question was.
Sure, thank you. My question is related to, does this point also include payments processed for businesses or delaying or temporarily eliminating taxes and fees on businesses?
So what we're really talking about here would be deferral of the tax, of the commercial taxes, which would take into account either if the business owner owns their building and operates a business in it, or if it's a landlord and they rent to the business operator, and would be the business would be paying the taxes presumably to the landlord, who would then pay us, of course, depending on their lease. So it refers to anybody who's operating a business basically that is in a property that's assessed as commercial, industrial, or multi-res.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Councillor Burrell?
Sorry, I don't have the agenda screen up. What was the next installment if this gets approved? Is it May? Oh, sorry, June 25th.
Correct.
All right. I would also like to talk about that for a minute. If this emergency continues through whether it be 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, I would like to be able to revisit that and work out something in a later date, because we don't know how long this is going to last for. And when the emergency does get lifted, it's going to take time for people to start going back out into businesses and start going out back into the public. So, and the trust factor as well on the emergency being lifted and being back around people after so much time. I would like to revisit that in the future. I'm happy with the way it is with the June 25th, but I would definitely like to keep tabs on that as we go further.
Well, to your point, Councillor Burrell, and to the rest of council, I think as council, we're going to have to revisit all these items on a continuous basis, depending on how long the COVID-19 continues and depending on timeline. So what we've learned, if we need to call a special council meeting for any factor, we can do so with the right notification. So I believe this will be ongoing, and I believe it will force our council to revisit all issues, because they will ever be changing as we move forward. And as we get new announcements, both from the province, as we've heard today, and also from the Public Health Ontario. So I think your point's well taken, but I think that's something we will certainly deal with recommendations as they come forward from our emergency control group, who meets daily on this issue. Are there any other questions of clarification? Then Deputy Mayor, if you could read number 5.
Thank you, Your Worship. The due dates for the residential final tax bills, which have not yet been issued, will be set as June 25th, 2020 and October 29th, 2020.
Mr. Davey, is there anything else you'd like to say to this, number 5?
Yes, Your Worship. Typically, now that, of course, budget's been passed for a while, we would come out with our tax rate bylaw, and we would, in that, establish when the due dates for the residential tax bills are. Historically, the first half, that bill is split in 2 due dates. One would be at the end of May, May the 29th, so it would match up with the original commercial due date. And then the second one is usually the Friday after Labor Day, which I think this year was to be September 4th or something like that. So in recognition of pushing the commercial due date off until June 25th, the rationale is that we would issue the residential bills and have them with that same date. And then we felt that if we go to June 25th, that an early September date would probably be too soon for people on top of the first part. So that was the recommendation, that we go to the end of October, again, to give homeowners, residential property owners, a chance, again, recognizing, as I think Councillor Barreau mentioned, that once this crisis is over, it's still going to take a while for people to get back to work, to get back on their feet. And so that was the rationale for those suggested due dates.
Okay, thank you for that. Questions, clarification? Deputy Mayor?
Just a question through you to Mr. Davey. So those tax bills, I would assume, have not yet been printed. And once this passes today, then those new dates will be incorporated into the tax bills as they go out, correct?
Mr. Davey?
Yes, Your Worship, to the Deputy Mayor, that's correct. Those bills haven't been printed, and we would have to come back with the bylaw to establish those dates.
Just to follow up.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Given the extra month, well, actually 2 months, because you're doing 2 different installments, have you obviously considered the impacts on the town's cash flow? No problem there, or else you would have brought it forward, I assume.
Mr. Davey?
Yes, again, through you, Your Worship, to the Deputy Mayor, the cash flow is not an issue or a concern at this point in time. Okay. We are also, of course, monitoring, and on a phone call this morning with our Ministry of Municipal Affairs rep, I raised the issue. I know I wasn't the first to raise it. It's been raised by other treasurers around the province. Is would there be any consideration to giving lower tier municipalities some relief on when we pass our installments on through to the school boards? Typically, we make those payments 4 times a year, at the end of March, the end of June, the end of September, and December 15th. And I think what may come out of this is there may be a bit of relief. Now, again, this March one is not going to be a concern for us, but going forward, if we're experiencing a reduction in cash flow and we're not able to maybe collect some of those taxes, then I think it's only reasonable that perhaps the upper tier and the school board should likewise see theirs cut back a little bit. So that's something we're still monitoring, and we're looking to see what reaction, what actions the province might take on that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, clarification? Seeing none, item number 6, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Number 6, any taxpayers on the pre-authorized payment plan with concerns about paying their next payment due, which is April the 10th, 2020, may contact the Finance Department to discuss payment arrangements.
Okay. And Mr. Davey, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This has been an issue that's come up again right off the start of this situation, where people are concerned that the automatic withdrawals that they have set up, that they may not have the cash flow in their banks to be able to continue to make these payments. And I know other municipalities, this is one of the first items that they've looked at in terms of providing some relief to taxpayers to not have to come up with these payments right away, especially if they're in a situation where they've been laid off, they're out of work, and there's a bit of a time delay in when they might start to see EI benefits come through and that sort of thing. So the idea with this is that we would give people that are in that situation the option to contact the Finance Department and request or have a discussion about how their payments might be adjusted. Now, in talking to the finance staff here, we felt that would be a better approach to deal with those questions than it would be to say we're going to cancel that due date or payment date, which in this case would be April the 10th. Payments come on the 10th of the month. because for a lot of our taxpayers, they're used to those payments. If they're seniors, let's say, are on a pension, they have their cash flow is still going to continue to come in, and it's easier for them to deal with the payments that they're always used to making. Again, if we were to cancel or this April 10th pre-authorized payment, what we would be looking at is later on in the year, obviously, we would have to increase those monthly payments to still have their taxes paid in full. So all we're really doing is shifting the burden until a later part of the year. And I think for what we're if you will, what we're betting on here is there's more people overall that would rather continue with their existing payment than there is that need them to be adjusted. And so from a staffing level, we would rather deal with the people that need an adjustment as opposed to having to deal with them all of our people on those plans, and then have to adjust all of their payments later on to try and catch up again. So again, it's one of those situations where we're going on sort of our working knowledge of our people that are on that plan. And again, there's not going to be a right or wrong answer here. It's a matter of we're trying to come down on this side of the majority.
Okay. Discussion. I'll start with Councillor Chorley, then Councillor Darling.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify for those taxpayers who are paying monthly through automatic billing, what would their next payments be? Would it be May the 10th and June the 10th? And also, are they on a 12-month payment schedule or a 10-month? It was my understanding it was a 10-month schedule where there's no payments in December and no payments in January. Really, my question is, there isn't really any action promised in point number 6, just simply the promise of a discussion about payment arrangements. I'm wondering if it's possible to be more specific with a May or a June 10th deadline payment deferral. And in theory, could their payments then also be made in December and January to make up for the 2-month difference?
Mr. Davey?
Well, again, Your Worship, all of those options are possibilities and are available. And that's why we haven't said, this is exactly what we're wanting to do. I think that way, if you go that route, then you're, again, removing any options for folks. You're just saying, okay, this is what's going to happen. We're going to not take your April 10th. We're not going to not take your May 10th. And then we're going to add a double payment in December or something to make it up. So my preference would be to leave it open. Obviously, staff have the clear direction from myself, and their own instinct is that we want to work with people and we want to do whatever we can to help them out. And so that's why, instead of just saying this is how it will be done, it's let the people that need the help get a hold of us, and we'll certainly do everything we can to accommodate them.
Okay, Councillor Darling, and I'll come back to Councillor Chorley.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I agree with Mr. Davey in that I know for myself personally and many of my friends that they are on pensions and they have all their bills set up monthly. Their car insurance, their hydro, their gas bill, everything is equal payments and set up to fit within their pensions and their budgets. So along with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Davey, do you know approximately just percentage-wise what the number of taxpayers, or the number of taxpayers who are set up on equal payment proportionally?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Darling, I don't know the exact percentage. I think but it's got to be probably 40% maybe of our taxpayers. I know the staff keep a running total of how many people they have on the pre-authorized payment, and they always have almost like a little competition each year to try and get more people to sign up for the pre-authorized payment. So it has increased, and off the top of my head, I think we're probably, like I say, probably around 3,000, 3,500 or something like that that are on the plan. And it is, going back to Councillor Chorley's comment, the residential plan is a 10-month plan with no payment in December and January currently. The commercial plan is the 12-month plan.
Yes, just if I may continue on that.
You have something question? I'll allow one more subsequent and I'll go back to Councillor Chorley.
No, just what Mr. Davey was saying. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Go to
Thank you,
Councillor
Councillor Chorley.
Thank you. I'm just looking for a little bit more clarity. You said we will do everything we can to accommodate them if people were to contact the finance department. Can you explain what you can do to accommodate people? And I absolutely, just to mention this, I agree that people who are on pre-authorized payment plans probably would like to keep their expenses, their monthly expenses, predictable and regular. And so I definitely think it's appropriate that we let people initiate that change by contacting the finance department. But I'm still seeking clarity on exactly what the finance department can do for those people.
Mr. Davey.
Yes, Your Worship. So through you to Councillor Chorley, what I would suggest is that the annual property tax bill is the annual property tax bill. So for instance, if somebody's property taxes for 2019 are $4,000, on the pre-authorized payment plan, they're going to pay $400 a month. So if we eliminate, say, a month or 2 months, if that's what they ask for, then really what we're going to, if say we eliminated 2 months, that would mean $800 that would be deferred. And that would leave the remaining months of the year would have to be adjusted to make up that $800. So, and if somebody wanted to say stretch that into December and come in with a post-dated check or something for the balance in December, we could work with that as well. So when I say work with people, what I mean is that by the end of December, the plan would be that their tax bill for the year would be paid. And what we'd have to do is determine how it gets there. And that's why I'm saying that for some people, if they're established at the $400 a month, they might find that easier than having relief for a couple of months and then all of a sudden have to come up with $600 or something over the last 4 months, let's say, to catch it up. So that's really, and again, as has been mentioned on this call, I think what we're trying to do right now is put an interim measure in place so that taxpayers who are concerned can have some understanding that we are going to, we are working with them to make it work for them. Just to kind of take a little tiny bit of the pressure off them right now. And then, I mean, a week from now, it might be a totally different answer we come up with, just the speed at which this is happening.
Okay, other questions, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. I just got an email from Mr. Draper. He's still not getting sound. Can we resolve that? He hasn't had sound for a while. My question to you, Mr. Davey, unless you want to take a 2-minute break to resolve that, or?
No, I think we proceed at this point, see what can be done behind the scenes unless I get direction otherwise.
Okay, my question then, Mr. Davey, is if there is someone out of that 40% you mentioned that do pay every month, what kind of a time advance notice would they need for you to actually pull their April 10th payment out of your system? And is everybody in your department working in-house full-time to do this?
Mr. Davey?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Deputy Mayor. Assuming that this passes in some form today, it would be ideal if people could get in touch with us as soon as possible. That April 10th payment the file would have to go to the bank to make that payment probably within a few days prior to April the 10th. So I would say the 7th.
Okay.
One of the benefits of doing these meetings this way is I'm able to get updates from my staff on a regular basis as we go along here. So they're
Okay.
opposite monitoring. I can also add, Mrs. Taylor just brought me in the stats. So of 8,411 tax bills, 3,916 are pre-authorized payments, and another 1,193 are paid through individuals' mortgage companies. So you'll have to do the math on the percentages.
Okay.
Other questions, Deputy Mayor?
My second part of that question was, is your staff in-house full-time to, let's say all 3,000 people called you, would you be able to handle that? Probably not. So I just wanted to know if you're all working there or is anybody off-site?
Mr. Davy?
Yes, Your Mayor. Well, first of all, if all 3,900 people call us, I don't think if we had all of our staff on, we could handle all those calls. And that's clearly what we're betting on, that there's more people going to fall into the category of leaving their payments as they are and carrying on. In terms of staff working and staff not working, that goes to the bigger issue of the total municipality and what we've done. But basically, what in almost every department, what we have done is split the staff into two teams, and we have half the team in the office. We have the other half of the team either working from home or assigned to be at home so that they're not in the office in case we do have an outbreak. So we have enough people to be able to handle the phone calls that we expect. Let's put it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other final questions? Otherwise, I believe we've been through the 6 items, which takes us back, Mr. Larmer, to item number 1. I believe if I was listening carefully, Councillor can put on the floor if they so wish to. I believe Deputy Mayor was suggesting she might consider splitting item number 1 into 2 parts because they deal with 2 different issues. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Beatty?
Thank you, Your Mayor. And I'm sorry, just before we get on to the next formality of the motions, just to reiterate my earlier question and maybe through you, Your Worship, to the clerk. Again, I don't want to lose sight of that opportunity for councillors to bring forward additional suggestions for consideration. And if the clerk can just let me know when the appropriate time is to do that before we move on to formalities, please.
Yes, perhaps the clerk can give me direction as well, because my intent was to deal with the 6. And the reason being for the 6 before is because they were defined as part of the special meeting notice. I believe to do otherwise, I'll allow the clerk to reiterate, but they have to be approved by a quorum of council in which to proceed if there are additional items to be added. But I'll allow the clerk to highlight that.
Your worship, I think you take amendments to the main motion now and put forward. And then if council wishes, somebody can put a motion to reconsider. So if there's new amendments to it, like 8, 9, 10, someone can move to divide all of them and can move through there.
Okay. So then, Councillor Beatty, since you raised the point, and I believe for clarification, Mr. Larmer, each one will need a seconder and each one will need to get a majority to move forward. Is that correct?
Yep, just like we're in regular council.
Thank you.
Regular council, not a committee of the whole. So each amendment will need to be second once it's put on the floor and then open for discussion and voted on.
Okay, Councillor Beatty, back to you.
Okay, so thank you very much. So I'm putting a motion to amend, which is to add, correct?
Yes, yep,
Yes,
go ahead.
okay, thank you. And this is within, I believe, financial assistance. So what I've put together, so the motion to amend is action recommended that in addition to the aforementioned financial assistance recommended by CAO, an expedited review and release of the $6,000 in funding approved on February 9th, 2020 by Council to support Greenwood Coalitions and its partnering agencies' proposal to provide wraparound street level outreach and drop-in services as part of the emergency shelter response currently underway in Cobourg through coordination with Transition House. And I can send that to the clerk.
Your worship, just needs a seconder.
Seconder. Councillor Chorley. Any further discussion? Councillor Darling. Sorry, I can't hear.
Could I ask Councillor Beatty to read that motion again, please, or that amendment?
Okay, Councillor Beatty,
Yes. Um,
if you could just
Okay.
read.
Sorry, I was going back and forth. Before I read that, your worship, through you to the clerk, I have it on an amendment, a notice of a motion, a notice to amend form. Can I share that on the screen? Would that help with everyone, or do you prefer me to send that to you so people can read along?
Go ahead and share it, Councilor Beatty.
Okay. I just want to make sure everything else is closed. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
So this would be number 9, just for clarification, or 8, sorry, 7?
7.
7.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. That's my email. Can people see that Word document on their screens?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so to Councillor Darling's request, I will reread it. So the action recommended that this following financial assistance is added to the motion. An expedited review and release of the $6,000 in funding approved on February 9th, 2020 by Council to support Greenwood Coalitions and its partnering agencies' proposal to provide wraparound street level outreach and drop-in services as part of the emergency shelter response currently underway in Cobourg through coordination with Transition House. Now that there's a seconder, am I allowed to speak to the rationale of the motion, or?
Yes, we'd ask you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. My thought around this, my intention around this, and I obviously acknowledge that the emergency shelter that was established at CCI on Friday through MPP Puccini's initiative is obviously within the purview of the county, and then operationally through the coordination of Transition House. It's my understanding, after speaking with the network of community outreach organizations over the weekend, because the shelter is only operating from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., there's an increased need in that drop-in and wraparound support between the 12-hour, the daytime period. This group, this partnership can be mobilized and ready to go. So because this is already an open motion from February 9th, that really the intention is just to review and expedite, to pivot that detail so that the resources and the community support can get behind what Transition House and that emergency shelter partnership is currently doing. So it's to help add additional capacity.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Deputy Mayor?
Councillor Beatty, can you explain what you mean by a wraparound? Because the initial motion back in February was to come forward to council with a proposal as to where this drop-in center was going to be. And if I recall, it was supposed to be for one day. It was supposed to be some financial breakdown as to what this $6,000 was supposed to be used for. And I'm not seeing any of this in your motion. Can you maybe explain a little bit further?
Sure. Yes, thank you for that. Through you, Your Worship. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your question. My understanding is that really what this is so that the wraparound meaning all essential services kind of under one roof, because it's my understanding right now that after individuals have to leave the shelter at 8 a.m., support is either closed because of the mandate from the province, or the support is fragmented. So the idea of having wraparound under one roof support, and essentially it would still follow the same details from the February 9th meeting, which was the direction from that proposal details to come forward, which I believe the network agencies have put together, and obviously would shift now that this new emergency shelter is up and running at CCI. So really the intention of the motion is to activate that support right now, while obviously the details would have to be developed at the operational level between Greenwood, the partner agencies, and more importantly, Transition House, As to my understanding, they're the ones through the county who are operating the emergency shelter.
Deputy Mayor?
I'm still not getting enough detail here. I'm getting, we're gonna cut a check to whom? The Greenwood Coalition, and they're just going to, we haven't got a location yet. Is this going to take part of CCI as well as where the transition house is now relocated? Is it a different storefront? Is it, I just don't have any information. I'm just wondering why, I just need a little bit more before I support this.
Sure, no, and I appreciate that. I think what I could almost do, and you'd have to give me a moment to pull it up, is I know essentially what I'm trying to do is bring forward the motion that we've approved in February 9th, which read something along the lines of supporting a drop-in effort outreach with essentially the details and the location to be determined through, the CAO and the partner agency. I can't speak to it directly because I know that it's changing by the hour. But I do believe that between Transition House, Salvation Army, the county, and Greenwood Coalition, they are looking to either have access directly in the shelter, or one of the partner agencies will be forthcoming with the space. So maybe to the clerk, maybe I could seek some clarity on how I can make that detail apparent in the motion to make council more comfortable.
Mr. Palmer?
Your worship, I would maybe direct this to the interim CAO treasurer regarding this. I know that council approved in the budget $6,000 for Greenwood Coalition for that. So I think maybe this motion could be redundant if the checks are going to go out to them eventually. I'm not sure I have to speak to the treasurer about that.
Mr. Davey?
Yes, your worship, without the actual, either the motion from February 9th or the budget in front of me, it's not clear to me at this point exactly what that motion was back in February. And so I'm not sure whether we were directed to find a location and assist with some rent, or if it was just a cash contribution. So it's not, without a little bit more homework, it's not clear to me either.
Okay, I'll go back to Deputy Mayor.
I do recall, Mr. Davey, that there was a mention of a space downtown or somewhere in town that was to be provided, my recollection, at no charge, plus a $500 or $1,000 a month stipend for, I guess, expenses. And I do recall asking for a detail. This is $6,000 of taxpayer funds, and we did indicate that there would be. This is February the 9th. Today is March the 23rd. We haven't seen anything, and I'm wondering, Councillor Beattie, if you would consider waiting until April the 6th until we have details in front of us. Things have been put in place at CCI. I think people are, and this was only supposed to be for one day a week, not every day. So I'm not, again, I can't support this unless you give us more details.
Sure. And, oh, sorry, can I speak?
Yeah, Councillor Beattie.
My apologies, sorry. I should pause and wait for a cue. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I hear you. I think ultimately if I remember the motion, it was, thank you to the clerk, it was to, through the CAO and a member MOU, the details would be identified. Already aware that there's a task force working on the emergency shelter and putting those partnership and finding the appropriate locations with the MPP and the county. What I'm trying to get at is, I think in a time of crisis where there is this immediate gap of where do the most vulnerable go during the day to receive aid, information about self-isolation, food, internet, hygiene, rather than just being kicked out onto the street. I feel confident that the partnership that's been formulated between these expert agencies can figure that out. And so I'm asking council to consider expediting the release and the support of that $6,000, and that we entrust the emergency management system that is being developed to figure out the location between their own networks. I know that they will all follow public health advice and support. And I have full confidence that with the county and Transition House and other key stakeholders leading this, when I was watching from home last Monday, I heard it very, very clear that it's not this council's jurisdiction to get involved in the operations of emergency shelters during this response. So I'm just asking council to consider expediting the release of that $6,000 so that this important service gap can be addressed. And if anything, it would be putting the town of Cobourg into a leadership role and adding our support to the established partnership that came out on Friday.
Councillor Chorley.
Yes, it's my understanding that council approved this project, and I think the issue is really one of timing. If this project is authorized to move forward, I don't think we should see it move forward in November or December. I know that staff are extremely busy in responding to the COVID-19 crisis, but it does make sense to me that council provides some instruction that in terms of timing, this project moves forward fairly quickly, because so much is being put in place in terms of providing assistance and housing to people who are very vulnerable and in need right now. So I'm just wondering maybe if the motion could be tweaked so that council is instructing staff to begin this project, maybe with details for its implementation to be brought back to council at the April 6th Committee of the Whole meeting.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you. Sorry, I was taking some notes, Councillor through your worship, to the Councillor Chorley, and didn't quite get, I believe, were you recommending a suggested edit? Because I am open to edits, if I may, to the clerk. I'm open to making edits to this through discussion. But I was taking notes and I kind of lost what you were articulating at the end.
Councillor Chorley.
I was just suggesting that in terms of timing, maybe the motion could instruct staff to begin this project, begin moving it forward, and bring details of its implementation back to council on April 6th so that we can understand exactly, to the deputy mayor's point, so that more details could come before council. But to your point, Councillor Beattie, in terms of the timing, moving this project forward now does make sense.
Yes, because I think to Councillor Chorley, I think if what I hear from you is putting in a deadline of, or a timeline of April 6th or Committee of the Whole and staff reviewing the operations, I appreciate that, and I absolutely hear the details that the deputy mayor is asking for. This is changing half day by half day, and I am just asking council to consider that we issue this $6,000 that has already been approved on February 9th. Essentially, we're waiving the concrete details of a partnership. And if anything, what we're actually getting behind is an already established partnership between the county, the province, the school board, public health, the hospital, and Transition House. I don't know if we can get involved with staff and operations. These agencies and networks need immediate funds ASAP. Because at 8 a.m. every morning, those that were sheltered and then those that are unsheltered, they are on the street with nowhere to go.
Councillor Darling.
Yes, if I may. I agree with Councillor Beattie. We did make the motion to put these funds forward. All I would ask for an amendment is that I have full trust in all the partners in the group that they're going to do a good job, but maybe they could bring back an accounting statement as to what they did with the $6,000 so that the taxpayer knows that this money, what it was spent on, whether it was food or shelter or whatever. But to have just to hand the $6,000 out, not have any accounting of it, I would like to see some accounting in the end if possible.
Okay, and I believe Councillor Burkett had his hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe what Councillor Beattie is getting at, this thing is evolving rapidly. I would agree with Councillor Darling in the fact that it'd be nice to see some financial reporting back to council on where it was spent. But, you know, if we look at the April 6th date, by the time we get this implemented, that's 3 weeks away. And I think Councillor Beattie is trying to get this thing on the ground when it's most needed at this time. So that's just my comment on this.
Okay, and just for everybody's awareness, everything is moving at the speed of light. Everybody knows or certainly is aware that the Northumberland County, in liaison with Transition House, in liaison with the Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board and the MPP PECUNIARY, facilitated the interim move to CCI. The county, under their wing, took different groups, as announced by Councillor Beatty, and what they could do being collectively under the Health Act to expedite the circumstances they're working under. At this point, I can share with you that the county is taking the lead, not the town of Cobourg, on all these venues, and the lead was taken without a large degree of input from us. It was certainly county-led. So I want that to be quite clear. And they did, any actions they've done were, again, in conjunction and in cooperation with the health unit. So I believe we've had enough discussion. Councillor Beatty, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, or my apologies. Thank you, Your
That's
Worship. This isn't to, I just want to bring, I believe can everyone see the screen? I believe I reshared my desktop. Yeah, to a few points I heard, if it's satisfactory, I added at the end of the motion with an accounting statement of the funds spent to be submitted to the interim CAO and council on a monthly basis. I don't know if we can put a specific date, as obviously this pandemic is not time bound.
Okay. Any other comment from members of council? I see your hand up, Mr. Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to add, from a staff point of view, April 6th is only 2 weeks away. It's, in terms of when agendas or whatever would need to be done for that meeting, it's not very far away at all. In terms of staff resources, I really don't see how we could put any resources towards trying to work with something or whatever. So if it's council's wish that we participate in this, the only way I could see that happening is to write the check.
Okay, fair enough, honest answer. All right, we've had lots of dialogue. Councillor Beatty, did you have other recommended additions at this time? You said, I thought you said initially you had a number of additions. Is that correct?
I do, but I believe we have to vote on a point of order, maybe through you to the clerk. This is a formal motion we have to vote on, correct?
Okay, thank you. And I believe, do we have a seconder for that motion? Now it's been amended. Councillor Burkett.
No,
Any further?
Councillor Chorley seconded that motion.
Right, but I just want clarity because there was the addition about the reporting back.
So I would just check with Councillor Chorley if she's okay with standing the second.
Is that okay, Councillor Chorley? Thank you. I take that as a yes. Okay, so Councillor Burkett, is there any other discussion? I think we've had a healthy discussion before us. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Against? Carried. Councillor Beatty, do you have others that you want to raise at this point?
I do, if I may. Thank you, and Your Worship, possibly through to yourself or the CAO, because depending on the answer, maybe it's just a question. I was also considering asking council for support for the food bank and understanding how urgent of a need they have now that additional citizens who were never service users will be neighbors and accessing the food bank. But I did see that this morning, $200 million that the province of Ontario is putting towards the social sector also includes food banks. To the mayor and possibly to the interim CAO, do you both feel confident that the money that we will receive through the provinces will be immediate and sufficient to support the Fair Share food bank location here in Cobourg?
I'll speak now. I'll go to Mr. Davey. In our, again, our team, we've heard that there's a need, but we have to investigate further. We have calls being made out to see specifically what is the need for our own particular food bank, because we were hearing the idea of that were lacking cash or the availability of cash. And those calls have been made out today and tomorrow to try and get a read on our own food bank. That does not speak to the provincial allotment, but I'll allow Mr. Davy to comment further if he wishes.
Yes, Your Worship. I don't have anything to add on that point. I don't have any details or specifics about what funding might be forthcoming from the province. I have not had those details made available to me as yet.
So perhaps, Councillor Beatty, if you allow us some time to make those calls, both to our MPP, to our own food bank, through our team, we can probably bring back some maybe evidence to you, and then maybe that could be considered in our April 6th meeting.
Thank you. I'll leave it there. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that.
And
Thank you for the time.
Back to Councillor Beatty, do you have additional?
I do apologize. I have one last question and then I'm finished.
Okay, thank you.
Through you to, through the work, my apologies. Through you, Your Worship, to the interim CAO, and these might not be relevant at this time. Again, I'm just going back through the final points from the MPP and the local chambers and some additional recommendations for financial assistance. Accepting building permit applications digitally and waiving in-person submission requirements, and then permitting ongoing construction, ensuring building inspections are going ahead in a safe and secure manner. Are they relevant to this financial assistance discussion?
I believe your points are well taken because they have been reiterated from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. They've been reiterated from other financial institutions, and everybody came out today. I believe if we read MPP Piccini's concern or request in summary, his comments also dealt with permits and what you've just spoken to. Perhaps the best order in this one for you to meet with Glenn McGlashan or converse with Glenn McGlashan and his team, again, to see if there's anything that is required to be brought forward in that endeavor, again, for April 6th, because there's no doubt we're going to be dealing with building permits for the foreseeable future, and to see if at that time, is there something that staff are recommending to this council in terms of any particular incentive.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the time. I'm done.
Okay. Are there any other outstanding? I'm going to Councillor Chorley.
Thank you. I'd like to discuss what we can do in terms of utility bills for local residents. The town of Cobourg is in a great position in the sense that we own lakefront utilities. We own our own utility companies through Holdco. And I would like to put an amendment on the floor suggesting that council instructs Holdco to consider doing essentially what we've done with property taxes, to allow payment deferrals and or a temporary waiver of penalties and interest charges on unpaid utility bills. And I'm just going to share that 1 second.
Okay, just for my moment, did not, if my time serves me correctly, I believe the Holdco board did put out their own recommendations approved by the board to all the users of the utilities. Most recently, I think that came out just this past week. Did council not see that?
Yes.
Now, can you provide some clarification? Did it include any financial measures to help take the pressure off consumers?
I'd have to reread that, but to me, it did make a defer. I don't have the details before me, but I could certainly get that to members of council.
Just Your Worship, I'm not sure if something has to be put on the floor. We need a seconder and we need to discuss what's on the floor. Just a reminder.
Okay, can we have you reread? Did you have a motion before us, Councillor Chorley, or was it a question?
My intention was to put a motion on the floor, but if you could provide some clarity, if this has already been done, then there's no need to put a motion on the floor, but I would appreciate some clarity at the moment.
Well, I don't have, I know they've made motions at the board put out for the users of the utilities. That was done this past week, but I apologize. I don't have that before me at this point, but I know it was done. I'm happy to send that to members of council to see if that meets with what you were hoping. But I don't have that before me.
I believe Mr. Davy has something to share.
Mr. Davy?
Yes, your worship. I don't have the specific information in front of me either. But I can say that I think Lakefront were actually out ahead of us in terms of getting that information out as to the measures that they were going to take. I think if I recall, they were very similar in the sense that people that needed some assistance could certainly call and make arrangements for that assistance. I think they were also talking about waiving any late interest on the accounts. And of course, during this time of year, they're not in a position to disconnect services or that sort of thing for arrears. So they would not be doing that in any event, and especially in these circumstances. So I think their board has already taken the necessary steps to provide that assurance to the utility users.
Yes, and I can make sure that information is shared with all of council. I apologize, but that was done just recently, I would say the last 2 days or so. And then I can see if that meets with Councillor Chorley's where you wish to go on this matter. Does that work? Councillor Chorley?
I'm just thinking about it.
Well,
I do think that because council is gathering and meeting relatively infrequently right now, it is important that we just get a little bit of clarity, if it is possible, perhaps for interim CAO Ian Davey to look up the details. I haven't seen any information about that. And if you can just provide reassurance at some point in this meeting that there are some deferrals or waiving of penalties or interest charges that are coming forward from Holdco, then there's no need for this motion. But if you don't mind looking it up, I would appreciate dealing with that in this meeting.
Well, your worship, just to show you how efficient I am.
That's good, Mr. Davey.
Actually, it wasn't me at all. It was just handed to me. This is what's come out from, so they're saying, we recognize that this is a difficult time for everyone, and we want our customers to know that we're here to support them. As part of Lakefront's commitment to customers, we have offered, number one, increased payment flexibility to customers experiencing hardship. If you're concerned about paying your bill or have been impacted by the pandemic, Lakefront wants to help. Please call us to discuss payment arrangements in order to provide more time to pay outstanding balances. We understand the unique challenges for everyone, and some customers may have difficulty making their monthly payments. Effective March 16th, 2020, Lakefront will be removing all interest charges on outstanding balances until May 31st, 2020. Number three, the province's winter hydro disconnection moratorium is scheduled to expire on April 30th, 2020. Lakefront has extended the disconnection moratorium until May 31st, 2020. So that's the information right from Lakefront's website.
So I guess to Councillor Chorley, does that in some way address what you were going after?
Yes, for the most part it does. So I think that's terrific that they've done that. Yeah, I don't think there is a need for the motion unless other members of council feel differently.
Councillor Burrell and then Councillor Beatty.
Is that including commercial as well in their press release from Lakefront Utilities?
Mr. Davey?
Sorry, through your worship to the councillor, I believe it's all billings. It just refers to all their ratepayers.
Councillor Beatty?
Thank you, worship. Through you to the interim CAO. Does any of that address off-peak pricing? Waiving off-peak pricing or?
No, and the reason being because the Ontario Energy Board controls all pricing, off pricing, and I don't believe any utility has the right in which to play with those rules because they come from a much higher body.
Right, okay.
Understanding
Thank you.
that's not permissible.
Thanks.
Any other amendments, Councilor Burkett?
Your worship, I believe the lakefront has already applied to the OEB at this time for the rates to be lowered to to address Councillor Beatty's question there.
Yeah, they have to make application, but whether it's governed or accorded is, of course, to the provincial body. Has to go to that level. Any others? Oh, Councillor Chorley?
Thank you. I have another suggested amendment to put on the floor. And this is just regarding council's own information that council receives so that members of council can be in a good position to make judgments about the financial impact of COVID-19 going forward. So I'll read the amendment and then I can provide a written version if needed. And further, that in order for council to remain informed of the potential financial impact of the COVID-19 emergency, that council receive the minutes or a summary of all community control group meetings within 24 hours of each meeting. And again, this is really because I think sooner rather than later, I think council will need to convene a meeting to discuss the 2020 budget, go through the budget, identify projects that are no longer a priority, and think about making some reallocations. And council will be in a much better position to do that work if they are informed of the work being done by our emergency community control group, who've been very, very proactive, moving very quickly. But it is important, I think, that council understands the kind of measures that are being put in place.
I can only state before I go to the clerk and Mr. Davey, it's my understanding that under the Act on Local Emergency, that the record keeping is confidential and is not to be shared. With that being said, however, it is true that council has the right, if we need to move resources, money, the like, that would come through our interim CAO as a request to council to move allocation of funds. Because as you know, anything over $50,000 would, through our procurement policy, would require council's approval. I'll go to Mr. Davey first and then Mr. Larmer.
Well, your worship, we can certainly, now that we're starting to settle into a rhythm of our day-to-day life in this new world, certainly one of our priorities is to come up with a method of updating council on a regular basis of events that are happening and decisions that are being taken. Again, I wouldn't want to commit to releasing minutes of those groups at this point. Basically, what we do in the EOC, or the Emergency Operations Center, is we track action items. So during that meeting, the way those business meetings, we call them, work is we go around the group and we give everybody an opportunity to say, you know, this is what my department is doing, or my area, and this is where I have some extra resources available, either human or assets that I can deploy. And other people may say, well, I need some help here, I need some help there. But basically what we're tracking are action items so that we know that when we come back together as a group the next day, we can say, all right, you know, you said you were going to do this, has it been done? And if not, why not? And what else, what do you need, or what help do you need to get it done? So definitely the understanding, and again, what we've been dealing with, and again, we're only, you know, over a week into this, is the proper method to make those council updates. Because of normally what happens is, because an emergency is a very quick moving event, and the mayor's involved at being at the table, the mayor would be the liaison back to the rest of council to get the word back about what's happening. Again, just because of circumstances beyond all of our control, this last week, that didn't happen probably as quickly or as fluidly as it should. So going forward, it'll be a matter of whether we, you know, issue out a bullet point sort of statement to council once a day or every couple of days to say, these are the decisions that have been taken by the emergency control group. I think that would help significantly. clearly, if there's going to be significant financial resources or changes required to budgets or projects canceled or directions changed, now that we have this mechanism that council's approved today with the changes to the procedural bylaw, it makes it much easier that we know we can come back to council on a regular basis if need be and make those requests for changes. So I think, going forward, I think that's what we're going to strive to do is improve that flow of information so that all seven of you folks are receiving some kind of daily or every other day or something briefing as to what is taking place, so that that you're better informed to deal with questions that come from residents and taxpayers to you.
I'll come back to you in a moment, Councillor Chorley. Mr. Lambert, do you want to say anything at this point? No. Then Councillor Chorley.
Thank you for that, Mr. Davey. But I'm hearing two messages, and I still need a little bit more clarification because on one hand, I'm hearing that meeting minutes would be considered confidential, but I'm also hearing that members of council need to be kept in the loop more closely. So who or which piece of legislation dictates which pieces of information are confidential? What can be shared with council and what cannot be shared with council?
I guess the first point of clarification would be that they're not minutes, and this group is not functioning, let's say, the way council works, where somebody would make a motion and it would be debated and approved. This group is dealing with issues that arise from a day-to-day basis, whether it's providing portable toilets or providing transit to make sure people can get around town, those sorts of things. Dealing with security issues and dealing with, making sure that our first responders, our emergency service people have the proper personal protective equipment, masks and gloves and things that they need, trying to source out items that they're starting to have difficulty getting. It's those sorts of things that we're dealing with that really are just, again, these meetings are intended to be very rapid and fast moving, and it's like, okay, who's going to get that? Okay, I'll make that call. I'll get it. When I get it, I'll bring it to this location. These are not, like I say, type of meetings where there's going to be detailed minutes taken. So what I'm getting at is that what needs to come to council perhaps going forward is on a daily basis to say, this is what changed today from yesterday. Not.
Go ahead. And if I can add to that, one thing that did change today, and I haven't got it out to you yet because of the way my day is going, but the decision was made to put signage up to close all playgrounds within the town of Cobourg and to encourage citizens not to have their children, and those signage are being done as we speak. But when those kind of decisions are made, I want to be clear, under the local emergency that we enacted or declared, along with the provincial, we do not, nor will we need to go to council for every decision. We cannot go to council for every decision. That's not possible. But I do agree, when we make those kind of decisions, the signs are done, they're put in place, and the citizens are informed. I do concur with the interim CAO that we need to find a mechanism in which to bring up to council all those kind of prominent changes that we're moving towards, so you have an awareness of where we are when it happens. So that could we improve? Most certainly. Are there any other questions? And just to make known to all of council, the group does meet Monday through Friday, each and every day. And if need be, we will meet on the weekends as issues arise. And as decisions are made by the group collectively, with, again, Captain Mike Villeneuve as the emergency management coordinator for the team. along with Shannon Murphy, our emergency planner, as those collective decisions are made and they influence what's happening in the community. We will find a mechanism so we can get that out to you on a regular basis. I appreciate the questions you've been filtering through me as mayor. As they come in, I've been taking them to the team each and every morning as to where we might be as we receive questions from either yourself or citizens within Cobourg. And that has been done. Councillor Beatty?
Thank you. I do appreciate that. So would those end of day briefings come through the chief as the coordinator, or Ashley Purdy as the emergency response communications, or that come through a summary from the interim CAO, just for consistent messaging, resourcing to, because I can appreciate yourself, your worship, how extremely busy you must be on top of all that and keeping council informed, which I'm sure we all can say we appreciate. So is there a designated staff resource or emergency operating group member that would be responsible for compiling those briefings in a consistent format to council on a daily basis?
I agree. Your point's well taken. It's something that perhaps Mr. Davey and I can discuss, because being head of council, perhaps it would be me and liaison with Mr. Davey. I know, for example, to go back to the playground, the moment we decided that all playgrounds would be closed to the public and hopefully their children, Ashley Purdy, as part of the team, would be putting out that press release to everyone. But with that being said, I agree with you. There has to be a consistent go-to so you know who to look for and from whom. And we'll discuss that first thing with Mr. Davey tomorrow morning, to your point. Because I agree, it is important to have a consistent contact on who that might be. Because I know Mr. Davey, as part of that group, is pulled in 101 different directions based on what's crossing his desk as part of that team. Mr. Davey?
Yeah, I was just going to add, your worship, if we can get this organized, I still believe it should come through you to council. Of course, there'll be support for you to help pull that together. So whether that's myself, Ms. Purdy, whoever that helps to do that. And I think it's important if we can, like I say, if we can establish this, that it happens at a certain time each day. So whether that's 4 o'clock or whether it's whatever time of day that is, just so that then if counselors are receiving questions during the day, they can say, well, no, I'm not aware of the answer to that, but we will be briefed every day or every other day or whatever the routine becomes. So at least then you can answer, if you don't have the answer then, you expect that you may have the answer by the end of day, sort of.
Okay, well taken, and I'm sure we can establish a time that will work, hopefully that we'll get out to. So we'll confer and make those decisions tomorrow and pick a time and when that will be and questions, and so there'll be clarity on this issue for everyone. Is there anything else outstanding? Councillor Barreau?
Yeah, a couple things on this emergency committee. I would like to also have all the different medical, financial, food, business, with descriptions on how the public can get help. I think that's a pretty major important aspect in transmitting to the public the message from that committee. If we are able to, let me get my words right. If we're able to have different resources listed on our websites, the town websites, whether it be the Town of Cobourg, Experience Cobourg, on all the different new releases that's coming up, the press releases, as well as any financial aid or food aid, where people can go with descriptions and places and kind of hours of each of those times. I think it'd be a lot helpful for our citizens to have that.
Mr. Davey?
Yes, your worship, through you to Councillor Barreau. One of the things that's part of the emergency control group, okay, so just for clarification, when we talk about the acronym EOC, that's the actual Emergency Operations Center. Now, if this was traditional type of emergency, this whole team would be meeting, say at the fire hall, which is our primary EOC, and meeting there on a daily basis. Given that we're doing this virtually and with our virtual meetings, then it's the same thing. It's a virtual EOC, if you will, for these meetings. The other acronym is the Emergency Control Group, ECG. And part of that group, everyone that's part of that group has a designated title, a designated job to do in that group. One of the jobs is a public inquiry officer. And one of the things that we have been discussing as of over the weekend and today is starting to get our public inquiry lines, our phone lines manned, get the messaging that we want to have on those lines so that people can call and receive that type of direction that you're mentioning in terms of assistance for food, assistance if they can't get out. So the role that we see ourselves taking is more of a coordinator role in some of those services so that people can come to that public inquiry line and very easily and quickly, without having to go through a lot of press 2 for this and press 3 for that, very quickly get the answers to their immediate questions and be directed in one shot right back to the primary agency or whatever that's going to deliver that service. So again, these are things that are discussed on a daily basis. And I know I wasn't able to attend the meeting this morning of the emergency control group, but I know that that's something that in the next day or so is going to be established, because clearly in this type of situation, communication is key in getting the messaging out, and so that's definitely a priority.
One last thing.
Councilor Burrow.
Are we allowed to ask questions on why some of the choices this committee has made?
I would have to say no. You can make inquiries through me if you see something you're perhaps not in agreement or is not sitting well with you. Through me, the mayor, you can certainly let me know your concerns. I'm happy to take those to the group, but you can imagine the number of decisions that have to make collectively, upwards of 17 people being at that table in all different facets of our community. So in respect of that community and that group, we're moving as fast and as quickly as we can proactively. Please remember, with the understanding that not one of us have been through this pandemic before, and we're learning as we go through. So if you have something that you hear otherwise, yes, please filter the question. We're not telling you not to filter the question, but if you think you're going to be in judgment of the committee, then my answer is that is not your role as a counselor in this group.
All right.
Your worship, point of order, we have to get back to the motions. I think Councilor Chorley had something, and then we go back to the main.
So Councilor Chorley, I believe I heard you indicate it based on what you may have heard, you're going to perhaps withdraw this motion at this time for Holdco?
No, not for Holdco. The motion that I put on the floor was regarding members of council being updated by the community control group. And I do appreciate the clarification that you and Mr. Davey have provided. It is reassuring to hear that daily updates and the flow of information to council, there are plans to increase that. I think it's very important. I want to say that I do appreciate that we have a huge team of staff and led by Mayor Henderson, who have been putting a tremendous effort into providing a very fast response to this crisis. I appreciate that during a state of emergency, those decisions do need to be made by a smaller group of people, and they need to be made quickly. But in the last few days, I've come to the realization that this is not going to be a short-term emergency. This is not a tornado with the short-term aftermath or flooding event that's going to span a few weeks. I think it's clear now that this emergency is going to continue for many weeks, possibly many months. And with that in mind, I think because members of council still operate as an interface with members of the public, we still receive comments and questions and concerns from the public. We need to think about our working methods and adapt them going forward so that we can make sure that feedback from the public is being fed through council to the emergency group, and that information that's crucial from the emergency group is being fed back to council so that we can update the public in a timely manner. So I would just encourage members of council to think about how we can adapt our working methods for the long haul, so that we can provide the best possible service. And with that, I will withdraw my motion for now, but certainly give it some more thought, and we'll see how it works going forward.
Okay, and I can assure you, Councillor Chorley, after my meeting tomorrow with the group and Mr. Davey, I will have something out to council. I will say not by 4, but I will say my usual 8 p.m. at night or before that. I'll have something to all of you as to the steps we'll take in this regard.
And
Mr. Davey?
if I could just add, and excuse me, Mr. Larmer, we're probably way out of order here, but I know one of the great beauties of this new video conferencing system is that when we hold these meetings on a daily basis, you get to see everyone's face on the screen of the team that's working on this. And I just want to assure you and the citizens of Cobourg, when I look around that screen and I see the talent of the people, whether it's the emergency planner, Shannon Murphy, the emergency control, community control coordinator, Mike Villeneuve, obviously Chief Paul Vandegraff, and everyone else that's part of that team. I mean, it's a really talented team, and I'm not saying that because it's in my team, so to speak. I'm saying that these people know their role and they know their job, and they're doing it very well.
Okay. With that being said, I believe that takes us back, if I'm not mistaken, sorry, Councillor Barreau, one last comment.
Oh, I was going to make an amendment. Sorry. Keep going. I was going to make an amendment. Sorry.
To?
Another motion. Like I was going to add something.
Okay. Sorry.
Not to that topic, to another one.
Okay, go ahead. You have the floor, Councillor Barreau.
I would also like to add in that list that the town of Cobourg encourages landlords to provide residential and commercial tenants with temporary grace period on rental payments upon their request.
Sorry, could you read that once more for me? I apologize for my poor listening.
That the town of Cobourg encourages landlords to provide residential and commercial tenants with temporary grace period on rental payments upon their request. So it's basically saying that the town of Cobourg is encouraging rental forgiveness or to work it out with their tenants. It's just a recommendation. It's not we're not saying you have to do this because we don't have the power for that, but it would be just as able to work it out with their tenants if they can. If they can't, totally understandable.
I understand what's before us. The only comment I have, we really don't, and I think you reiterated this already, we don't really have any authority in our role to tell a landlord what to do or what not to do with their own personal business. And I think it's putting us personally into a gray area where we may not wish to be, because every landlord's dealing with, I'm sure, a number of issues that I couldn't even contemplate. So I'll leave any other comment from members of council. Any other comment otherwise?
You just need a seconder on that.
Seconder to proceed. Councillor Beatty, thank you. Any other comment from other councillors at this point to Councillor Barreau's amendment or motion? Councillor Darling? Councillor Darling, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. To Councillor Barreau, I understand where he's coming from, and being a landlord and wearing two hats here, I have had tenants contact me in regard to rent issues and whatnot. And I've also been monitoring it from the government's point of view, federal and provincial. There has nothing, to my knowledge, been said about relief for landlords in any way. All the relief has been granted is EI, assistance for business, to help them in paying their rents. At this time, there has been nothing that I'm aware of for landlords. I do agree that as a landlord, I am going to speak with my tenants, each and every one that calls me. I've had several calls in regard to this issue, and we're in the process of deferring or whatever the tenant, we can agree to. So, I mean, I agree with the mayor. This is a tricky one. Even if I wasn't a landlord, I wouldn't vote for it because I think it's a very gray area. All rent tribunals are provincial. The Rent Review Act is provincial, and those sort of things to deal with rent are all provincial. And I think we will be overstepping our bounds.
And if I can make another comment, Councillor Burrell, perhaps maybe the question to be asked back through our MPP, David Piccini, is what is being done to help landlords, which could perhaps come more to provincial level and address maybe the concerns that you were speaking to. Councillor Beatty?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just reading something. I'm going through my summaries from this morning's announcement. AMO Communications sent out through the province, but to Your Worship's point, I think clarification from our MPP. Funding will assist also individuals who do not qualify for supports under federal programs. There's going to be an expanded emergency assistance program will be administered under Ontario Works, and this would include assistance such as food, rent, informal childcare. So I think the working class individuals, if I'm understanding this correctly, would be able to, I think what happens is they would be able to access support for things like rent, which then would obviously not benefit, but support the landlord, kind of the upstream of that, I think. I don't know if councillors saw that came through during our meeting while we've been online, but I just wanted to share that for context, but I do think it's important to maybe understand that a little bit clearer from our MPP.
Right.
Any other comment? Councillor Burrell?
Basically, it was just to encourage the relationships between the landlords and the tenants to talk about it. The town of Cobourg, tonight, if this passes, we're doing everything we can to support the resident taxpayer. And I just want to ensure that the relationships between landlord and tenants, whether it be commercial or residential, is encouraging them to speak and talk like Councillor Darling is doing. That's all my motion was to have that relationship.
Councillor Darling?
Yes. Thank you, Worship. Just in hindsight here, I mean, this has been a motion on the floor, and this is the first time we've done this, and if this had been part of a regular agenda, I probably would have declared a conflict of interest. So at this point, I am going to declare a conflict of interest in voting on this motion.
Okay, thank you, and I'm sure the clerk can note it as such.
I guess I'm not sure. I'll have to put this in writing to the clerk, but I will follow up with that.
Okay, with that being said, any other comment? Councillor Chorley?
Yeah, I acknowledge that as a municipality, we don't have the authority to impose any kind of rules on landlords on the kind of grace that they give their tenants. But the way I view the role of government is not just what we can pass, that's a hard and fast rule, but we also influence. And in the same way that we provide advice to the public and encourage the public to practice social distancing, but we can't insist upon that, we can't enforce it. I think it is appropriate that we just, as a statement, encourage landlords to have that conversation with their tenants as a principle and as a gesture and as a sign of the community coming together. And of course, we need to be sensitive to the financial pressures on landlords as well. But this motion that's on the floor, the wording is just to encourage, so I would support that.
Okay, fair enough. Any other comment? Otherwise, I'll call the vote. Any other comment? Hearing none or seeing no hands. All those in favor of the motion? Against? It's tied, therefore the motion's defeated.
No, I don't think it. The deputy mayor voted yes. Did you not?
I did.
So that's.
So let me do it again. I apologize. Let me do it again. All those in favor? I'm just looking at the screen.
Yeah.
Sorry, I miscounted. All those against? Thank you, Councillor Barreau. Therefore, the motion carries. I apologize for not catching the one hand on my screen. Are there any other additional amendments at this point before we go back to number 1? Hearing none, I'd like to then go back to number 1 in the order as presented.
Your
And
worship, this motion is still one full motion with the amendment
yes,
for 7. And it's moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councilor Darling.
and if I could go to you, Deputy Mayor, in our initial discussion, you thought you might consider splitting this. Are you of that purpose or not at this time?
The first
Just give it a second.
motion, basically, 2. We'll start with splitting 1, if that's agreeable. So the motion to split number 1, the transit service can be provided at no charge until May 1st, 2020. Sorry?
Sorry, I see the hand from
Yeah.
Mr. Larmer, just for clarity.
So currently, right now, this motion is one single motion.
We have to pass,
Then one to add an additional item, which is item number 8 by Councilor B, which we voted on. Right now, this can't be split in unless you divide the motion, because if you split it in the motion, it's a motion. So number 1, it doesn't matter how, we could just make it 2 if you want on that motion. So all together would be voted on. But right now it's one single motion.
okay.
Did we not vote on Councillor Beatty's motion separately already? I
It
believe we
includes
did.
to this. So now it's part of this motion. So there's 8 now on this.
What's 7? Let's see.
Sorry, I apologize. 7. I apologize. 7. 7 on here.
Okay. And is that including number 1 split into 2?
That makes 8. Is that what you're going to put forward on the motion, Deputy Mayor? 8 now?
Deputy Mayor,
Let's give it a second.
okay.
And we voted on Councillor Barrow's mention. Initially, you said the 1 to 6 would we come back to. Anything further than that, we would vote individually. That's not what you're saying now?
No, we put the main motion on the floor and we
Okay.
made amendments to it. There's one amendment passed, which makes it 7. If you're looking to put on the floor to have it number 1 split into 2, that's 8 different points.
We voted on 2, not 1.
Yeah, but 1 was defeated.
Which one was defeated?
No, they're both carried.
Sorry,
They're
they're
both
I
carried.
apologize. Yes, both carried. I apologize.
Okay, so we're not dealing with those additional items. We're dealing 1 to 6. Is that correct? That's what I need from you.
No, they've been incorporated into the main motion now. So let me just go through them. We have 1, which is transit service we provided no charge until May 1st, 2020. We have 2, in addition, the extended hours for accessible transit will be eliminated until May 1st, 2020. Then we have now 3, which is the free parking, 4, which is a waiver, 5 is the due date for the second installment, 6 is the due dates for the residential final tax bills, 7 is any taxpayer authorized payment plan. Then we have the amendment to the motion, which is Councillor Beatty's, which was the 6,000 for the wraparound for the stakeholders with Greenville Coalition. And then we have the 8th one, I believe, which was Councillor Bureau's regarding encouraging landlords to temporary delay, provide grace periods for commercial and residential tenants.
Thank
Okay,
you, Mr. Larmer, for that clarity. So knowing that, back to you, Deputy Mayor.
so I will put a motion to divide the 8 items before us and call the vote for each individual one.
Okay. And
Councillor Darling, are you okay with that? Because you seconded this original motion?
Brian, your mic is muted.
Brian,
Counselor, sorry, are we 8 or 9 motions? 1 was divided and 2 were added?
9.
9.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm with the motion to divide.
Okay,
All right, Councilor Barreau, do I see your hand up before Deputy Mayor continues?
I was just seconding the divide.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just went back to Councillor Darling because he was the original
Yeah.
seconder.
I was good with the second that.
Okay. Okay,
Worship?
All
Your
in
worship, you want to go through them then?
Yes,
So we
Mr. Farmer.
have to call the vote on the motion to divide. So moved by Deputy Mayor Sagan, seconded by Councillor Darling to divide the motions into 9 parts.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Larmer. Deputy Mayor, back to you.
Okay, we'll start. I'm going to read the motion right from the beginning, or do we just need the individual motions?
Individual motions is
I
fine.
think so, because we've already read that. Okay, number 1.
So just a point of order, the deputy mayor is going to introduce each of those ones, chair, worship, and you're going to have to get a seconder on each one, and then put them on the floor for discussion, and then go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Number 1, transit service will be provided at no charge until May 1st, 2020.
Seconder. Councillor Darling, discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Carried. Against? Carried. Deputy Mayor, back to you.
Number 2, in addition, the extended hours for accessible transit be eliminated until May 1st, 2020.
Seconder. I'm looking for a seconder.
Motion doesn't reach the floor.
Councillor Darling,
Yeah, okay.
any further discussion? All those in favor? All those against? It's defeated.
Number 3, free parking will be provided in all municipal lots and at all municipal parking meters until May 1st, 2020.
Seconder. Councillor Beatty, discussion? All in favor?
Point of
Against?
order, are we all on this? Because I'm seeing a lot of faces that aren't moving.
Well, I am watching the screen, Deputy Mayor, the best I can, so let me
I
do
know.
this again. All in favor? Against? Carried.
Okay. Okay, number 4, a waiver of all penalties and interest charges on unpaid property taxes, which would normally have been applied on April 1st, 2020 and May 1st, 2020.
Seconder. Councillor Barreau, discussion? All in favor? Against? Carried.
Could I ask that everyone put their hand up just so I can see that everyone is active here? Who's active here?
We
We're
all,
active.
We
Okay.
all are, can see it on the screen.
I'm not seeing Councillor Beatty's hand go up.
So,
Right
well,
here.
I'm watching all the screen to make sure, so that's almost.
Okay,
You have tried
Sure.
going to gallery view, Deputy Mayor.
pardon?
Gallery view, you should be able to see us all on the screen.
I'm in gallery view.
Okay, my
Okay.
apologies.
So Deputy Mayor, back to you.
Okay, this would be number 5. The due date for the second installment of the commercial, industrial, and multi-residential property taxes due May 29th, 2020 be deferred until June 25th, 2020.
Seconder. Councillor Barreau, discussion? All in favor? Against? Carried.
Number 6, the due dates for the residential and final tax bills which have not yet been issued will be set as June 25th, 2020 and October 29th, 2020.
Seconder. Councillor Beatty, discussion? All in favor? Against? Carried.
Number 8, I don't have that motion in front of me.
7,
Oh, number 7.
7, the bottom one.
Sorry. Number 7, any taxpayers on the pre-authorized payment plan with concerns about paying their next payment due April 10th, 2020 may contact the Finance Department to discuss payment arrangements.
Seconder. Councillor Darling, discussion? Councillor Chorley?
Thank you. I'd like to suggest a small amendment to the wording just to provide some clarity. so that residents understand exactly what's on offer here. The wording to discuss payment arrangements, it's a little bit vague. I'd just like to make it a little bit more specific, and also to include that deadline of April 7th as being the time when members of the public should contact the finance department to make those arrangements. So I'll read the amendment. Any taxpayers on the pre-authorized payment plan with concerns about paying their next payment due April 10th, 2020 may contact the finance department by April 7th to arrange a deferral of payment in discussion with finance staff.
Okay, everybody clear on the amendment? Seconder for that amendment, Councillor Barreau. Any further discussion? Councillor Darling?
Yes, I'd like to ask the CAO if there's a problem with the word deferral. Like for staff to discuss, so they may think they're going to defer these for a year or something.
Mr. Davey?
Your worship, I don't really have a concern with that word. I think, you know, as we said earlier in the discussion, it'll be on a case-by-case basis, and I think we're all right there.
Okay.
Good. I'm good. Thank you.
Any other questions, clarification? Hearing none. All those in favor of the amendment? Against? Carried. So we have to reread back to the original deputy mayor with the amendment.
I'll try and come as close as I can, Councillor Chorley. Any taxpayers on the pre-authorized payment plan with concerns about paying their next payment due April 10th, 2020 may contact the finance department by April 7th, 2020 to arrange a deferral of payment arrangements. Close enough?
To arrange a deferral of payment in discussion with finance staff.
Okay, to arrange a deferral of payment arrangements in discussion with finance staff.
Brent's got it.
Pretty good.
You got it, Brent, or Mr. Larmer?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, any other discussion on that one that's been read before us? Hearing none. All those in favor? Against? Carried.
Now for 8 and 9, I do not have the original. Councillor Beatty, you have the one, and Councillor Bury.
And Councillor Beatty, could we go to you to assist us in this matter, please?
Yes, I did. Let me just open it again. One moment. So I'm just reading it out loud, correct?
Oh, you've just sent it to me, right?
Yes. I'm happy to read it. I have it open.
Yep.
Just
Okay.
point of order, for ease, your worship, let's just get the ones that made the amendment, move this motion.
Yes, that would be a good idea.
Are you looking to me? My apologies. I didn't get that. If so, can you repeat?
Through you, your worship, we're just going to let the person that amended that with that amendment to this move the motion. So Councillor Beatty and then Councillor Darling, and we'll get seconds on those.
I understand. Thank you. Okay, so I can proceed with reading out loud.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm tiring. An expedited review and release of the $6,000 in funding approved on February 9th, 2020 by Council to support Greenwood Coalition and its partnering agencies' proposal to provide wraparound street level outreach and drop-in services as part of the emergency shelter response currently underway in Cobourg through coordination with Transition House, with an accounting statement to be submitted to the interim CAO and Council on a monthly basis.
I'll second.
Okay.
Let's call a vote, your worship.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Against? Carried.
I think 8 or 9.
9.
Fine.
9. The town of Cobourg encourages landlords to provide residential and commercial tenants with a temporary grace period on rental payments upon their request.
Okay. Seconder? Councillor Chorley, any further discussion? All those in favor? Against? Carried. Mr. Larmer, I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, concludes the business under special council meeting number 2. I see you nodding your head.
Yep.
Before we leave, I'd very much like to thank Ron Jeske, the staff behind the scenes who put this together. I know at the beginning it was rather challenging with everybody cutting in and cutting out. I think we've come a long way in the last few hours. This may be the way that we're going to proceed with council meetings perhaps in the near future. And I certainly appreciate everyone, and I mean everyone, council, staff, Mr. Davey, those behind the scenes, those at the public, so we can get this right and deliver our business of council. It's a learned experience for all of us, and I'm proud that we perhaps might be considered the first municipality in Ontario to take this plunge. To me, it shows leadership on behalf of all of us, and I'd like to thank you immensely for your day's efforts in progressing the municipal business that we were elected to do so. With that being said, I'll call for adjournment. Seconder, Councillor Beatty, all in favor? Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Be
Yeah.
safe.
Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Yeah, stay safe.
Be safe out there.
Yeah.